Go to logi.gg/Datto and use code Datto10 to save money on your next Logitech purchase. While I know that episode 3 is technically going to be lasting a little bit longer, I am choosing to not include Rites of the Nine for my episode 3 recap. Rites of the Nine feels like a separate event in the same way that Into the Light last year felt like its own thing, so I'm going to review each thing independently. Let's start, as we do, with story. We went back to a weekly cadence of story beats, although Act 2 did not have a big gap like it usually does, instead launching straight into Act 3, of which the story in Act 3 was wrapped in 2 weeks instead of 3. So, Bungie kept things moving this time around. Eris and Drifter go to the Dreadnought, and Eris gets stabbed really hard and dies, except she's not really dead. She's in her own throne world because she's like a pretty big deal now as far as Hive go. Also, to quickly interject, while Sloane is technically a part of the season, it did not feel like she was basically at all due to the ongoing SAG afterstrikes, which meant that Bungie had to mute most of her dialogue in-game. So if it seems like I'm missing some Sloane-related activity, that's because without a speaking voice, I kind of forgot that she was there a lot of the time. Sloane is involved here, presumably due to the events of Season of the Deep. Anyway, after Eris gets not killed, we meet up with Savathun, who basically says to stay away from the Dreadnought and from really just everyone in her immediate family because she's dealing with some stuff and she does not want you to interfere. So anyway, we start interfering by collecting a bunch of Hive body parts to cram into places in the Dreadnought, and we end up summoning the Echo of Navigation. The Echo of Navigation is actually the memory of Oryx, who doesn't realize that it's a memory and it's been a while, and he's also actually dead, killed by us. But Oryx thinks that's kind of sick because his entire worldview is based on Hive sword logic, which is the core philosophy of the Hive, generally speaking, where you gotta kill or be killed, just to keep it brief. Xivu is also here being the war god that she is, but Savathun is pretty over the antics of both of them, saying that sword logic is cringe and whatever Xivu's doing is cringe, and that they should just forge a new path for themselves. Drifter is pretty emo after the end of Act 1 and bails because he thinks Eris dying is all his fault, and Sloane isn't really too stoked about that. Act 2 introduces the Court of Blades and Willbreaker, which is Oryx's sword. Eris tells us to forge the sword because it can cut into the Ascendant Realm, and she does not have the strength to get back to us, so we need to get to her. We do a short series of mini quests to get the components necessary to get the blade started. We give it a little test drive and cut open our way to Eris in her throne world, where her and Drifter have a bit of a reunion. This is where Eris explains more of what I said earlier about what's going on with the Hive trio. Savathun has gotten a taste of the light. She knows that she was lied to about her origins. That was the big revelation in the Witch Queen campaign. So she's just kind of over it. Everything, she's over it. Eris is still holding a grudge, though, and wants her throne world to be Oryx's prison, essentially. Eris and Sloane go back and forth about Willbreaker and the Echo of Navigation. Eris wants the Echo because it'll let them travel the Ascendant Plane, but Sloane is worried that Savathun or Xivu might get control of it. Oryx and Savathun fight because Oryx thinks Savathun is trying to trick him somehow, even though she's actually telling the truth, so getting him on her side will prove difficult because she is known for lying all the time. There's also a few Taken-related things happening in the background. This becomes a bit more relevant when we learn that only someone infused with Taken power can wield Willbreaker fully, which is what we need to do in order to sever Oryx from the Echo of Navigation. Oryx is trying to escape back to Fundament as a result of the argument that he and Savathun had. He got his original Taken powers there, so we're trying to shut that down by trapping him in Eris's throne world, which we are successful in doing after a ritual at the Court of Oryx. But now Eris wants to interrogate him for information, while Sloane is worried about Eris's ability to hold him in the throne world, and is worried about what happens if Xivu or Savathun come knocking, or worse. Eris tells us to stop whatever Xivu is doing, because, Xivu bad, and we head into the Sunless Cell Strike, returning from D1. The Taken own this area now, but Xivu is going there to get a bunch of the Taken to kind of, join the cause. So we disrupt the ritual, and we get the hilt of Willbreaker. The goal now is to continue disruption while keeping Savathun and Xivu fighting each other and not us, which we accomplish to the disappointment of Oryx, who is still dealing with the fact that the world has changed significantly since his passing. Act 3 starts with Oryx telling us that Savathun is coming for him, but he's not really stoked about going from Eris's prison to whatever situation Savathun is going to have for him. So we go to Savathun's throne world, we stop whatever ritual is happening there, and we yoink Malik's head, who is Savathun's son, and she's justifiably upset about that. We head back to the Dreadnought to get the final component of Willbreaker that we need, so now it is at full power. But we are in a pickle yet again. We cannot split the Echo and Oryx, but if we destroy the Echo, we would lose the ability forever to stop the Taken threat. Eris also doesn't want to spend the rest of her life being a jailer to the Echo since it takes so much energy to keep it there. The Dread might have something to help sever the Echo and Oryx, but we investigate, no dice. In the middle of that, Oryx gets loose from the throne world, and Savathun shows up to stop us from getting to him because she would rather deal with Oryx than us continuing to mess in her personal matters. Oryx is pretty much resigned to the fact that he has failed because his sisters aren't what they used to be, and also, technically speaking, he's dead, and thus, we destroy the Echo of Navigation with Oryx in it, and Oryx dies again, ? Savathun, on the other hand, extremely pissed off at us, and she says bye, and that's episode 3. That was a much longer story recap than I feel like I usually do, and again, I am not story guy, so I'm sorry if I messed up a couple things in there. Now that I've gone back and actually reviewed the events of episode 3 in one full sequence like that, there was a little more going on than I originally remembered. Obviously, it helps that you have all the fan favorite characters in there, including awesome voice work from Oryx. That really helped sell the experience. Basically every character's performance was awesome. I know that there was some criticism that it felt like episode 3's story just kind of ended anticlimactically, and I think in the moment it kind of did. I think part of it is that we're so used to the 3-part segmentation that when the finale was 2 weeks worth of stuff crammed into one, it felt like an, oh, it's over moment. But as a more casual story enjoyer, again, after reviewing everything in one go, the experience felt pretty complete to me. I don't know. Now, that being said, I think maybe part of why the finale felt like it was so abruptly ended is because it was so easy. The finale mission, to me, continues to push the idea that we need some kind of a legendary campaign difficulty for these kinds of experiences. You can't push the idea that we are in this horrific danger or that this is one of the most ultimate experiences of our lives and just have all the enemies be completely pathetic. It gives zero sense of the stakes at all. I'm just sucked out of the moment because I'm mindlessly spinning around, killing everything with no issue. And I realize Willbreaker, the sword, is really strong. It's a really good sword. I get it. So that's part of it too. But it just feels like another regular thing that I'm doing, and it doesn't have the gravitas that it should for the stakes or for the moment or the story thing that is happening. Gameplay. The 2 activities of the episode were the Nether and Court of Blades. The Nether was a sort of patrol-type space where you got to explore the Dreadnought. The Dreadnought was mostly intact as it was in Destiny 1, although a couple of areas got some revisions and some additions, which were pretty cool. You completed 3 small objectives in one area, which led you to a boss to kill, which then led you to another randomly selected area to go to, where you did 3 more objectives, so on and so forth. The main thing here was Bungie taking on some roguelike elements when in this activity. No automatically regenerating health, different buffs to acquire after objective completions, upgrades to unlock that can trigger different things with a bunch of secrets and collectibles to uncover as well. I remember on the first day of playing that I thought I was going to get tired of the Nether real quick, and I wasn't anticipating the greatest feedback from players, but I will say that it did grow on me over time. Bungie was significantly more generous with the loot this time around compared to episode 2, which was a very welcome change. In addition to that, there were 4 different weapon tiers, for a lack of a better term. Normal weapons, double perk weapons, which could be upgraded to triple perk weapons. Then you got shiny weapons, aka adept weapons, and then double perk or triple perk adept weapons. So like the true shinies were back. Conceptually, I love this, but there was an issue. On the double perk weapons, you also get double origin traits. And the other origin trait was runneth over, which is a really good origin trait. So in this particular case, getting a shiny was actually less beneficial than getting a double perk drop, because runneth over was better to have on a weapon than the benefit of a weapon being adept. I still like the system, but this was a small snag in the process. And I do know that there are some people who are not as big of a fan as I am of like the wealth of different options that can drop. Bungie did eventually buff up some of the shiny drop rates in the hardest difficulties, although the double perk shinies tended to stay pretty rare, which I personally didn't mind. I think they should be pretty rare. We just happened to have the runneth over problem. Unfortunately, all of the double perk shinies I got were linear fusions, and as we discussed in a video, I wasn't really super stoked about the linear. We again did not have any craftable episode weapons, and while I do think the shiny versions and massively increased loot drops somewhat made up for it, there is still very strong sentiment for their return. With the Edge of Fate coming up, the next expansion, and a rather large amount of systems shakeups, we're going to have to see where we end up landing on the crafted weapons front. The Tome of Want replaced the tonic system of episode 2 with a bit more straightforward of a system. You would collect currency during your runs, and then you could activate that currency in the tome, which would give you guaranteed drops every so often for a certain amount of drops. Simple, much less hassle, more drops, I'll take it. I also loved how Bungie had a lot of secrets and collectibles to go get in the Nether. The calcified fragments from Destiny 1 were a huge part of the Dreadnought experience, and to this day are still some of the most watched videos on this channel. So to see Bungie bring some of that energy back here was cool. Each area had secret objectives and puzzles to complete, which culminated in the Barrow Dyad exotic weapon experience that we had this episode, which we'll discuss in a sec. The issue I had here was that when completing some secrets and puzzles, you would get some kind of like an item, which then just completely disappeared. There was no way to track which items you had gotten, nor what they were for, and that doesn't really feel like Destiny's MO, you know what I mean? I know Destiny isn't like the clearest game in the world all the time, but usually when you get items, they go somewhere where you can see them, so that was a little confusing at times. Court of Blades, on the other hand, was more of a boss rush type experience where you would go into an arena, you would kill a boss, you would come back out, upgrade yourself with some rune powers, and then you hop back in. The statues on the left and right side would tell you what things you were going to have to deal with. So the left side was the first and the right side was the second boss, usually amounting to, here's what you got to do to win, and here's what's going to be annoying you. Turns out this information is actually pretty important to being able to figure out what the hell was going on in some of these rooms, because if you did not pay attention, you would be incredibly lost. And I know this because I did not pay attention at first, and I was very lost. This activity had a boss or time limit, 13 encounters or 10 minutes total spent fighting, whichever came first. I did like that if you were good enough to beat the whole thing that quickly, the activity would just come to a close and you could pack it up. There was an incentive to go as quickly as you could, which meant there was an incentive for knowledge and playing really well. The reputation grind for this episode was very significant, having to level multiple tracks up, and it did not feel like rep was earned as quickly as I feel like it is normally earned. Or maybe I just didn't play as much as I usually play. Or maybe I just didn't play in the activities that I needed to play in as much as I thought I did. But I remember having to grind some reputation to progress the Barrow Dyad exotic questline, and I remember it taking much longer than I was hoping it would. So let's talk about Barrow Dyad, this episode's exotic mission weapon. This one came around much earlier than the usual exotic mission would come around, launching in the first act. What took place after that was the collection of catalysts requiring the completion of various secrets and objectives within the Dreadnought and doing activities with Barrow Dyad equipped to unlock hidden quests. Compared to how we usually have been unlocking exotics and interacting with exotic missions, this was an incredibly welcome change of pace. I love the idea of, 1, not just running the mission over and over again, but mainly 2, having this process be driven by doing secrets and neat things in the Dreadnought and interacting with other parts of the game to unlock hidden quests and all that kind of stuff. Unfortunately, we had some issues. The main issue felt like the issue that we experienced at the end of this sequence, where a new section of the Dreadnought opened up, but you needed the correct RNG to even get there, and then also have the correct secret show up in that new section. This issue was solved pretty shortly after the launch of this by Bungie enabling people to spawn in every section of the Dreadnought instead of only 3 areas. And the time gating got a bit annoying as well, but I think we should be kind of used to that by now. And again, the tracking of the secrets, or at the very least the items that you got from them, proved to be a bit annoying. It made it difficult to track what you have done, what you haven't done, which made it hard to tell people like what you actually needed to do in order to unlock the thing, and then you get it. Still though, I would much rather have an experience like this over something like just running the exotic mission 4 or 5 times in a row and calling it a day. We also had the second dungeon in the Final Shape Dungeon Pass, Sundered Doctrine, but it is not technically a part of the season. While I don't think Sundered Doctrine is as good as Vesper's Host, I still think it was another very successful contest mode dungeon experience for day 1, although the final boss left a little to be desired. Some pretty novel concepts for mechanics, especially in the second boss, although on normal mode, the appeal does start to wear a bit thin for things like the first encounter, which involved just like a lot of running around. Fortunately, the solo experience was far less miserable than Vesper's Host was, and I do think it is actually a pretty doable experience as far as the average solo dungeoneering goes. The Season Pass weapon was Lodestar, the first ever primary ammo trace rifle. This weapon proved to be a PvP menace early on in the season, with Bungie taking some action against it to make it less oppressive, replacing that oppression with Redress's Estoc, a pulse rifle that was also incredibly oppressive for a while, and still might be to this day, I'm not actually sure. PvE-wise, I'm gonna be honest with you, I'm not sure I really used it at all, because I was on Cold Heart or Delicate Tomb for my Arc Warlock needs, mainly Delicate Tomb, because it got a huge buff that I expect them to revert a little bit. The artifact was heavily Arc themed, with a mix of Void and Strand as well, with this episode also coming with another 2 rows of perks to pick from. And I still feel the same way about the next 2 rows, in that I tend to not care as much about them, but we have a Dungeon Pantheon type event coming up in Rites of the Nine, where more options are going to be pretty significant for build crafting those dungeon encounters. Arc Warlocks were insanely powerful this episode, with Arc Titans getting a little bit of life to them as well. Both subclasses got new aspects that were both very powerful for PvE. Hunters got a new Void aspect, but it didn't do much for their PvE prowess. We had our holiday events, we had Moments of Triumph, same as usual, nothing really too noteworthy there. And then right before the end, Bungie launched a Corridors of Time-esque chess-themed puzzle. You had to go collect 60 chess pieces from around the game and use those to finish 27 chess puzzles, checkmating the Black King while also saving your own king if needed. As someone who actually knows how to play chess and some very basic theory, I thought these were a lot of fun to try to solve on my own. Completing this puzzle led to an image that the game would show you along with an ID number. The data compilation, like gathering all the images, is still in progress as I am writing and recording this video, so there's a decent chance that the rest of this experience will be finished after the edit for this video is complete, but if need be, I will recap everything in another video. Pretty fun way to cap off the end of the episode. Overall, I do think I preferred episode 3 the most, but I don't think that is a very crazy take. Having the main Hive villain trio in the mix, in addition to an insanely awesome Oryx voice performance, definitely helped carry some of that experience. It's just unfortunate that both Zivu's and Sloane's voice lines were missing so often thanks to the ongoing strikes where Bungie had to mute their dialogue in a fair amount of the game. Zivu is such a powerful character with regards to her voice and her presence, so to just have to read her lines was pretty disappointing. So, the episode experiment concludes here as we shift into Yet again, a new content delivery model with biannual expansions, although these expansions will likely not be the size of expansions that we have gotten over the past 3 years, since we're going to have 2 per year. Was the experiment a success? I'm not sure. I don't think I'd be willing to say it was a complete failure, but how much of a success it was, I am not sure. Bungie's marketing for episodes kind of felt like we were going to be experiencing something pretty different compared to the usual cadence of seasons. And I think most people would tell you that episodes still pretty much felt like seasons, minus the fact that one episode did not lead into the story events of another episode. The whole point was that they were all epilogues to certain storylines that Bungie wanted to wrap up before we went into the new stuff. Things didn't really feel different enough to warrant some of that marketing speak that Bungie did for episodes. So in that regard, you might view it as a failure. I do think there were definitely some highlight moments during the year, but I think people were anticipating on getting a bit more based on how things were described last year. A new era is coming with the Edge of Fate, the next expansion. We're going to get some more information about it very soon, with more detailed articles and videos to come after the initial reveal. At least that's what they usually do. But as it was outlined last September, there appears to be a significant amount of systems changes coming. It seems that no part of the game is safe from change. But after 8 years of Destiny 2, there is plenty that Bungie can and will be changing. I do plan on having some new player, returning player content shortly after the launch of the expansion to go over all of these system changes. That being said, I wouldn't expect the core of the Destiny experience to change. It's still going to be about collecting new loot while shooting some aliens. I have some more reminiscing to do in my 12-year retrospective video, so I'm going to save any other comments that I have for that video, and we're just going to wrap up here. Let me know how you felt about the Final Shape expansion era in the comments. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in Rites of the Nine.